Downloading. Program activated.
Bit of contretemps in my neighborhood. When you're 12, there's certain things you think you want to do. By the time you're 25, 26, and you're doing those things, suddenly you realize, actually, maybe I wasn't correct at 12.
Thank you for downloading the Fitbox Fizzy Cool podcast. In this episode, our guest is The Lincoln. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
As a child, I was exposed to a lot of music through the family, and that was of a very serious nature in terms of some really sort of heavy classical stuff. So be sort of 4 or 5 years old and you'd be exposed to things like Wagner. Pretty intense. I was also the youngest child, and I had an older brother and 2 older sisters who had exposed me to lots of music maybe I shouldn't be hearing at that age. But what it meant is that I was put through a process of hearing lots and lots of music very, very early, and then got very familiar with different types and genres and being able to sort of classify and have a taste, being able to sort of be critical of music, being able to sort of listen to things on the radio and decide whether that was good or not good. I guess in a sort of a very sort of traditional way of thinking there is such a thing as good and bad. And this then quickly developed to a point where I had an elder brother who could play guitar. He somehow allowed me to sort of follow in his footsteps of picking that guitar up pretty early, pretty young. I learned from him initially, seeing that you could copy the behavior of somebody else and you could produce music.
You say copying, but he obviously had a skill, but is teaching something that was evident there as well. Was he a good teacher?
Was he a good teacher? I guess sufficiently inspirational to get me to the point where I wanted to go and do the same. It's hard to remember the exact process and how that was delivered and to critique teaching in any given way now. It's quite a while ago. It was clearly done in a way that was effective and was done in a way that inspired me to go and do it with others. Certainly a positive in his camp for that, yeah.
We don't remember what people say, we don't remember what they do, but we'll always remember how they made us feel. And twice within that description of your experience with your brother, you used the word inspiration. So clearly he made you feel the right way. And that is ultimately one of the greatest qualities that a teacher can have and demonstrate and share, I would suggest.
I mean, moving on from the mechanics of teaching, yes, I guess it's the what does that instill, what does that generate within the individual who's exposed to it, who goes through that process of change. There is somewhere you are, there's somewhere you want to go, and there's often a painful process between the two. The facilitator of that is often very much remembered as in a beneficial way to have sort of helped to smooth that path, even though at some points they're presenting things that are challenging and difficult. They're still usually making it easier rather than more difficult. The situation when the learner is presented with, I don't know where to go, I don't know where to start, is certainly different from having a teacher that can at least show you a way.
And the way you went then was into music, and there was a period where you were in a band. And you did mention that you had an interest in trying to be or maintain some health whilst in a band. What was that like? Because the reaction perhaps that people have when they know that someone is or was in a band is to conjure up that rock and roll lifestyle. What did being healthy mean to you, and how did that manifest itself?
Well, moving through, I guess, my teenage years, and there was and this does relate to this particular question, it's just I need to give it a little bit of context, is moving through that particular time, there was a large period of time devoted to deliberate practice, improving. The view that I would leave the town I was born in and move away to a big city to pursue music more seriously. Along with that was the acknowledgement that operating within music, there would be many other components to that would not be just music, that would not be the sort of the notes played, it would be also the environment you'd be presented within. If we want to have a story that's associated to fitness, then it would be from an early age, growing up in a small northern town, the only thing you do is, well, you play football, but then try and sort of maintain some sort of level of physical activity. That was just not quite as easy then as it is now in terms of the number of gyms we have now is extraordinary, and access was just not as easy. By the time I'm sort of living in a big city and playing in bands of different sorts, and then in a band that is signed to a major record label, is touring, is playing some pretty decent sort of shows and gigs, then there is a real conflict. There is a situation where there's a hotel that has a gym, or there's a space where you could do some exercise, but you also then having very late nights, you're very challenged in terms of sleep, a different hotel room every night, or it's a van, and trying to also select reasonable nutrition to power this, again, is not easy. You're trying to eat well, you're trying to sort of keep active, and you're trying to perform exercise, you're trying to do exercise well. But this is a real sort of conflict with so many of the other factors that go with what is expected with being in a band.
Was any of that linked to being in a band, insofar as were you already linking your physicality to performance, to being on stage and being able to perform, or was it just that they were separate things? You did music and you also wanted to be fit and healthy?
I think it's very compartmentalized. I think it was completely separate. I would say that if I reflect on sort of aspects of my life, I think they have been sort of in compartments, in modules almost, that there's been music over here and there's been sort of development of education, and then the things I'd go and read about, or the films I'd watch, the things I'd go and sort of do to entertain myself. They're all sort of, a little bit sort of disconnected from one another. So I would think that certainly at that time, there was no connection whatsoever. It was simply just the case that, well, I like sport and exercise, and I also just so happens I like to do this as well. I couldn't see the connection. It wasn't as if I was maybe in the same way if you were sort of into dance, those two things would go together. This was very, very separate.
How did the transition come about from the music module into the health and fitness module?
I've often thought about this particular component of it, which is when you're 12, there's certain things you think you want to do. By the time you're 25 and you're doing those things, suddenly you realize actually, maybe I wasn't correct at 12. Now I've done that. The thing I thought I was going to do at 12, I've done it now. So I don't think it was that one became another. It was a realization, a reappraisal of where I was at that time, setting, age, and deciding that it was going to be something else.
Was that always going to be fitnessy stuff? Did you sit down and do a bit of brainstorming and consider other things?
I always like the idea that we were going to sit down to do that.
This is you mid-20s?
Yeah, this is me mid to late 20s, and I take a period of time out of my life to reflect on what I'm going to do next. This is probably 97. I'm going to go and do something. I look at what's interested me for a while. Fitness. I also think about, would I go more into sort of the therapeutic side of things? Would I go down more sort of sports massage? I decide that the sort of more active component is where I'm going to go rather than the sort of hands-on at that time. So that's one of those sort of crucial sort of pathways that are split at that moment. I think one of them was, I'm living in a small town. I want to go and do music. Okay, my pathway is, do I stay here? Do I move? At that point in 1990, 91, I moved to London, play music for a good period of the 90s. I get to the next crossroads, and this is then deciding, do I stick with doing music? And this is probably what I'm going to be doing for sort of the next 20 years, or do I think, no, I'm going to change and go and do something completely different? So that was the crossroads about sort of 97, having had that period of reflection and decided at that point, it's going to be personal training.
And what did you need to do in 1997 to become a personal trainer?
I needed to take some time to sort of finally get my plan together, research where I'll do this, put the appropriate funds together, put the appropriate plan together that I could study in a way that I felt was appropriate for me. We will see in terms of how I like to do education is slow. It's a take my time approach to ensure I can enjoy it. So it was trying to organize it in a way where I could take a period of time out of my life and do nothing but study and get this new career off the ground by having a really strong base for it. By the time we get to 98, there's a period of time I'm signing up for a PT course, and I know that for the next pretty much 18 months, I don't need to do anything else but study, get through the courses and get as much as I can from those courses. I know at the end of that, then I will then move into the fitness industry and I will start progressing in that way.
What was the experience of being on that course or that process of education? Was there a lot of face-to-face, or was it mostly face-to-face?
Well, now we start getting into the real sort of, I guess, some of our shared experiences in terms of that educational process at that time. So the late 90s, early 2000s, fitness courses were face-to-face, pretty much exclusively face-to-face, I imagine. I can't think of any.
And quite new, weren't they, as a formal?
Oh, absolutely. So I guess this is something, again, I'm just sort of skipping over here, but let's think about this. This is not long after the emergence of the first exercise to music courses. They were sort of aerobic classes and courses. People become qualified as gym instructors rather than just somebody down the gym showing you what to do. So this is the first real sort of epoch of education now for fitness. And these courses are evolving, but there's not many of them. There's very few training providers you can go and attend. There's some big names out there and you choose one of them and you pretty much sort of stick with that process. It's face-to-face. I would say the biggest step in my, I guess, fitness career would be that first course. From day one of that course until the final assessment of that course would be the biggest progression, biggest step that I would take because of where you're coming in from, which is knowing not much compared to where you end up. So that stands testament to those deliverers of information and what was in that content at that time.
Did it feel appropriate? Were you sat there thinking, not that you know what's coming, but we sign up for courses and we have an expectation. Was it meeting your expectation?
I was highly inspired by the process of the education that was set in front of me, that was delivered to me. From that first course, I was fairly convinced that I would want to do the same thing, that I'd want to replicate what was being done. I'd want to sort of teach these courses at some point.
You knew that early on that you thought, I want to be up there doing that?
I think I saw similarities in what I'd done before. I think I saw there was an element of performance. There was an element of teaching. I had also taught other people play guitar from a fairly young age. So I saw that there was a chance to develop others. There was a ability to display your knowledge and talk about it, an ability to use words in a very reflective, thoughtful manner. There's a way to use words where you could make every word count. That to me was very attractive. I think at this time also I'd read, I guess, a decent amount of sort of literature, and I valued words and I guess writing, and the ability to then project that in a room and to hold attention and to develop people's minds through the use of language was again very attractive. So there was a lot of elements within that interaction of tutor and student. I like this. I like the topic, the content, and I'd like to do the same. You're going to ask me a question, but I'm just going to add to...
No, go on.
Which is what the course did. It set up what was going to happen, as in this wonderful, fantastic day when I'd be then entering the fitness industry and working with real clients. It set up in a way that was almost, it made it very attractive. It made it very, I can't wait to do this. It sounds fantastic. It sounds as the fact I can help other people. Wow. Okay. All I've ever done before is, I've played some music and some people have liked it, but that's not the same as changing somebody's health, somebody's outcomes, that they can live longer, they could be happier. Those things, that seems, in terms of a scale or gradient of what you can do in terms of good, that seemed better. There's only positives delivered to me through this process.
I wasn't interrupting for a question, actually. It was an observation. No, it's okay. But it was an observation of something you said twice in a slightly different way. And then when you continued, you said it again, which is quite nice. First time you said it, you talked about developing others. Then you said something about developing minds. And then when you carried on, you've just ended with helping other people, helping people to enhance their own health and their own outcomes. And I had a lovely conversation with Keith on our first episode, and I've had this conversation with him previously about the difference between love and passion, and how when you are passionate about something, it is very much for you, and yet you clearly had something more akin to love, or was coming from a place of loving what you were doing, or the thing you wanted to do. You loved the idea of it because you were already of a mindset of doing this for other people.
I think it was portrayed to me in this way where I could recognize that. Whether I'd ever sort of perceived it in that way myself, if it had been taught by other people, if it had been taught by another provider, I don't know. What I took from it was there was a chance to help, and there was a chance to help others in a way I really hadn't sort of considered. Before, I thought I'll go and become a personal trainer, and that will allow me to work in a gym, and I'll work with clients, and I'll do things that I find interesting. But what I didn't really understand prior to the course was, I guess, the impact of that and the opportunity that could provide others. And I guess
but actually what you're talking about is the impact then of the teacher, aren't you?
Yeah, very much so. And I was incredibly lucky to be developed and taught by people who I immensely respected, thought that they did an excellent job. And I think that's one of the reasons that, again, I would aspire to do the same. I think this could be the same for everybody, but I could see that throughout there's this individual, you think they do a great job, and I'd like to sort of learn that and progress in that same sort of way. I was just very fortunate to be taught by people that were very, very good at what they did. Also that worked for me, as in what I mean by that is that I could appreciate them. That was my experience. That left me with drive to tutor, and then drive to do a really good job in terms of delivery of sessions to clients. And that's pretty much what I steered my efforts towards over the next sort of decade.
And continue to do both, continue to work with clients and to teach.
Yes is the answer to that question. It's just become a lot more atomized. It's a lot more diffuse. There's so many other things I do, that sort of purity of, I'm going to be in a gym, I'm going to help people. Or I'm going to be in a classroom, I'm going to teach people. The purity of knowing that on a day-to-day basis, that this is the content, this is where I need to be by the end of the day, this is the timetable, here's the aims and outcomes, these are my sessions, this is the slide I've spent ages making, I really like it and I like how I explain it, and these are the words I'm going to use, and I know the students are going to be thinking this at this moment, and I'm going to say this, and this is going to change where the conversation goes next. That simplicity, I don't really have that simplicity anymore, because I guess there's loads of other things I need to do.
We had a conversation a few weeks ago, and you mentioned something you were writing now, and you'd fundamentally finished it, and you knew it was good enough that it would do the job and pass the assessment process. Now your job, as you saw it, was to revisit that and make it better. So being good enough isn't good enough. It needs to be the best of your ability. What you've just described, I think, suggests that mindset was there quite a while ago. Is that fair?
I think if you want to play music, I guess, again, take it back to that. What I learned was deliberate practice made you better. And the point of practicing was to get better. And you were never good enough, as in you could always be better. The same process then was just sort of extrapolated across, that your sessions in terms of teaching could be better. There was always more. In the 2000s and the late 2010, I decided that I'm going to go and study at university. A pretty big decision, because I've been teaching now for a long time, and it's something that I've massively enjoyed. I perceive it's the most important thing that I do, and I've spent a lot of thought and effort in trying to do that well. In 2010, I decided that there's a new challenge required, that there is more I need to know. I want to operate in a different way. I want to operate in different circles, within a different environment, and a more critical thinking environment. These decisions lead me to the process where I have to go through many, many different academic assessments. Yes, there is a need for any assessment process, ideally, to pass. And that means there's a baseline criteria to be met. There's a benchmark. But once you get to the point where you realize that you're probably going to pass, then the course can become much more enjoyable, because then you can start to explore it and critique it and develop it further. That's what I tried to do with then each academic process following that. So I did a very part-time strength and conditioning degree, which allowed me to do module by module in a very, again, modular, segmented, compartmentalized fashion, but to extract lots from each of those modules. And getting to the place where a piece of work would pass, that's great, and allows you to enjoy the next process, which is making it as good as it can be. So yes, there was a sort of a bit of a game you'd play with yourself, which was, okay, pass, then get a first, and then be first. And be first is try to produce the best piece of work you can out of your cohort, out of your colleagues, and also better than you did last time. So there was a continual challenge of doing things to a very high standard. Trace it back to practicing really hard as a kid with a guitar, and then developing that same process, being inspired by others in different fields and different topics to try to replicate that in different ways. Yeah, the critical challenge of academic writing and passing those assessments is different.
And was that brand new to you at that point, when once you've signed up and right, I'm now doing a degree? Was that brand new?
Some aspects of it, yes. So in the timeline we started with this whole story with, we sort of did what happened in the 90s, then through the 2000s, I was getting involved in PT and teaching classes, and I was teaching people to become PTs. Now, somewhere along the line, I got involved with another company who were already operating at a very academic level. They were already sort of working with postgraduates all the time. That allowed me then to start to teach at a more challenging content that you couldn't just deliver without some support, without evidence, and without some critical analysis going with it.
How did the balance tip? Clearly, there's you're that engaged with the subject matter that you want to get the most out of it and allow it to manifest itself within you in a way where you can become elevated in terms of your abilities. How much of it was about that process of education and learning, and how much of it was about actually the subject matter itself and being a practitioner in the field of sports science and human performance?
It's hard to separate the two out. You're thinking that every assessment is about doing that outcome, that practitioner level component better, to do the job better. Within that question, that we could sort of see that there is a distinction between how and what. It could almost be that we could be saying here, it could have been any topic, and it's more how did we study it and what was the aim of that study, and the actual content could have been anything at all. The drive was still to do the role very well you mentioned tipping. I think there's a balance to be had here, which is you can become very focused on the academic component without then applying yourself to the applied, as in you start to lose those hands-on. And I think it's very difficult to balance right, and I don't know who does. You go down one route and then you pull back to another route. So I think for a number of years, there was pursuing the academic with the view of, yes, this is great for practicing, but there was a lot of academic and not a lot of practicing. I've tried to rebalance that in the last sort of year or so, but that's not been so easy. The point to carry on where I was in my own sort of mind with this is operating in a way where you are used to teaching if we talk about, say, level 2 and level 3 fitness courses, and they're massively important in terms of getting people into vocational situations and delivering great services as I wanted to myself. And then we're getting involved in a scenario now where we're having to defend every word we say, because we're now operating with postgraduates, and we're operating with people who have some serious letters after their name, and they've published all these sort of different papers, and there's a need to consider the information being delivered and the way it's delivered. So there's again another stream coming in. Now the fitness stream continues for a number of years. There's still some of that going on, but then it becomes more and more academic, both in terms of my own study, but also then in terms of my own delivery. A broadening of that stream of what I'm delivering and who to.
Because of the nature of you compartmentalizing things, you still see them as different as fitness and sports science?
I guess in the past sort of year, there's been a reappraisal of this, because one of the roles I hold at the moment is this head of education role for Comera movement science. That requires an integration of the clinical, the performance side of things, and also the fitness side of things. So when I say fitness and distinguishing that from performance, when I say performance, this is within elite sport settings. When I'm saying fitness, I'm talking about sort of everything that's not elite sport then. How to bring together the clinical aspects of physiotherapy, working with clinical practitioners, how then to build confidence in that group in fitness professionals, and what education routes can be offered that are going to give confidence to physios to say that this trainer, yes, I'm happy to give my patient or client to them and they can work together. I was fortunate enough to have this situation myself, working within gyms. I was fortunate enough to work with physiotherapists who trusted me enough to educate me, but also to let me work with their patients and clients.
But that's not fortunate. Or fortune, is it? I think that links directly to your approach to education and learning, which is that you will go above and beyond, because your objective is yes, on the one level, to be successful in each assessment and to come away with the best grade available. But you're already, and have always, I think, been looking beyond that at being really, really good at what you do as a practitioner. And so the physiotherapist would have identified that. That's not luck, is it?
That's their value judgment. That's for them to decide.
But it's not a decision they would make if you had literally done everything you needed to do to complete your level 2 and 3 fitness qualifications and no more.
From the probability science side of things, it's less likely. There's less likelihood that would have happened. All I could do, though, is if we stick that probabilities, I could raise the odds. I could work the odds in my favor by working maybe harder and having those conversations and taking the opportunity to learn from them.
And I think that's the point. That's what I'm trying to get at, I think. And that if someone was listening, like, if in their mind is that doubt, like, what's the point in doing more than I need to do to pass the assessment? Well, that's the point, that you increase your odds of being successful and open, many more doors to new possibilities and opportunities once you're out there doing the job. That's the reason.
If we go back to making education a longer process and making it enjoyable, if you're enjoying what you're doing, then it's not a problem. The process of doing is enjoyable, as in find what you like doing and do it as a simple motto for life. If what you like doing is learning and then learning through teaching, that's a really, I think, positive outcome, because both those things build your own abilities, but can also build others. So that's an okay interaction, I think, and allows you to maybe take the opportunities that are sometimes presented. Of course, there's opportunities we miss, and we're not always ready for all of them. But we can only, again, as I say, sort of play the odds in your favor by sort of increasing your own chances there.
You now work in an area that is linked more closely to sport and performance than fitness. When you're teaching now, would you say your experience is broadly more? That's not the phrase, is it? Would you say that you are now working with those that do, the athletes themselves is what I mean by that, or those that teach the athletes?
It's been predominantly those that teach the athletes. I guess it's one of these situations where that I'm trying to organize and harness scenarios where there's more hands-on with the actual individual, the athlete themselves. There is lots to be gained from working with the coach, the clinician, the practitioner. They are very open to many new ideas, and I do like to present ideas and to think about ways to present ideas. So that's a very enjoyable interaction. The interaction with the actual athlete is usually much more direct, as in to the point of this exercise is to do this thing and this is why. Whereas with the coach, it's more about all the things that could go with it and all the different aspects and factors that could go with it. With the athlete themselves, I think that's just it's a great experience to have, and again will build into your own anecdotes and your own way to deliver the content. So there's been a lot of time when there's been devising and building structures, models that others have used. That's great, but the chance to apply that yourself is a different type of challenge and allows you to stress test those models with real people as opposed to just presenting a model and letting others play with them.
Is one of the things that is exciting about working with the coaches of the athletes, is it that often there will be more than one of them, and so you've now got a group or a class environment, and it's that shared experience that really adds value to your experience as a teacher? Is that something you think you enjoy or derive more from than you would in that one-to-one relationship with an athlete?
There's always an element of negotiation and diplomacy with any teaching scenario that involves a group, certainly, but we're always acting as some sort of intermediary between the content, the space we're in, the teaching environment, and the individuals in the room and their own opinions and their goals and why they're there in that room at that time. So that's a good challenge, which I do enjoy. There's certainly more brains in the room, by which I don't mean intellectual power. What I mean is there's more thinking minds in the room. That's also a very good challenge, by which I mean you're trying to arrive at all the places they're going to arrive at in their own minds and be able to somehow summarize that and also then find a new strategy and direction to move on from that. And I would say that's not just within a working with coaches or clinicians. I'd say that within any teaching environment, that is the case, where you're trying to think not quicker than, but just be able to get to a point where you've got a good sense of what 20 brains have just thought about that are different, and then have a good solution to what's going to come out next.
There certainly needs to be some, I don't know if it's speed of thought as much as it is agility, because they will all be in the same way that quite literally, if they're all spaced out in a room watching you, they will see you from a different angle. Some of them will get the full frontal. Some of them will get a little bit of a side angle. In the same way that they have different perspectives on what you look like, they will all interpret what you say and how you behave in a very different way. And so to have questions come at you from different people's brains, I mean, I think that's the most exciting part of doing, it is the biggest challenge and you do feel the most alive. But I wonder if that sounds reasonable, that need to be quite agile.
I would completely agree. That agility, that change of direction within a time frame is, again, one of the great enjoyments of the teaching process, the teaching environment. It's a great challenge to yourself. Even in this scenario when you don't have anything of value to offer, how do you then negotiate that? How do you then harness the resource in the room to come to a satisfactory outcome?
That's lovely, by the way. That's lovely, by the way, that you recognize the contributions of the people in the room as valid resources.
Oh yeah,
to then use to enhance the experience for everyone. I love that.
I like to be very pragmatic if I can, and those resources are of great value. And let's use all the resources I can. Again, in previous conversations, touched on the idea of exercise design. The exercise design context is where we need to produce some sort of shape and turn it into an exercise. An exercise becomes an exercise when it has some sort of effect. It produces an outcome that you desire. And we can achieve that in so many different ways. So anything can be a resource to produce that outcome. And the same thing within a teaching environment. And certainly the individuals in the room fall under resources for me, for each other, for themselves. And they're all intelligent, experienced people who can be harnessed. And also for them, just as for me, I'm in a situation where I'm learning and so are they. So if they have the chance to forward, to put that information out there, then they are having the chance to teach others.
It's almost a cycle that should be encouraged. I think that you can't learn without teaching, and you can't teach without learning. To encourage learners to teach is, I just feel like I'm saying learning and teaching a lot, but that is learning. That even as a teacher in an environment where you've got the badge on that says teacher, you are still learning.
Certainly one of the reasons to teach is to learn, and that is one of the great joys of it, that you typically are going to teach what you are interested in, and it's a great way to learn about that. It's something that will forward as a real benefit to those that come and join companies who we employ as teachers, as educators, as tutors. And one of the key factors within that would be the fact that you're going to know more about the topic you enjoy, the topic maybe that is your job, the thing you do on a day-to-day basis. Teaching it to others will change how you think about it, probably give you a deeper insight into it.
Not even because it changes how you think about it, but that it encourages you to think about it. Often we will learn something and then just leave it there. We don't need it anymore. We don't use it. And it kind of disappears or dissolves in the mind. But when you're then asked, can you now show that to someone else? You revisit it. And it's in the revisiting. It's like watching a film or reading something or listening to a song. If we take it back to music, for that second, third, fourth, 100th time, you get something more from it. You notice things you didn't notice the first time. You appreciate a context that you weren't aware of.
The interaction of, I think, academic writing, the relevance of this, I'm going to come back round to how writing is much easier once you've taught something. Academic writing is where you really hold your face up to the spotlight and you see all the issues that might be on that face. Because if you start writing about something, you find out what you know about it pretty quick. And when you don't know much about it, that's also really, really apparent. So you can't really fake it. To aid that process, to make that process easier, of course, there's the reading of the literature, there is exposure to different people's work, and there's also your own experience in the field. But certainly some of the stuff I've put together and written has been a lot easier because I've already taught that content, as I've already delivered those sessions and had the chance to have those thoughts and ideas critiqued by people in the room, by individuals who will say, well, what about this? And will say things I've never thought of because, as you say, they're seeing that perspective from a way I could not see myself. And then that allows you to remember and evaluate and critique your own writing when you get to the point of that creation. This thing now on paper flows much easier. That ability to teach, that chance, that opportunity, let's call it, the blessing of having the ability to teach. And I don't mean ability as in skill, I mean the chance that you're given the opportunity is incredibly valuable because you are put in a position where others are forced to listen in a way that maybe in another social environment, that would not be the case. You would not be able to hold the floor for a period of time where you can dictate what happens next and you can dictate the conversation and where things go. So this role of teacher is a very special place. It's a very privileged place that gives lots to the teacher. And you could argue just as much the teacher as it does the students.
All I can do is take out my proverbial highlighter and just underline all of that. I couldn't agree more. Sometimes my response when we're having conversations is a slow one because I'm very aware there is so much in your head that just amazes me. And it would be very easy, I think, to know that much and be very pleased with yourself that you know that much. And yet that has never been the case. And I love that you're always listening, always considering, always evaluating. And my favorite Lincoln phrase, I think, and I use this every time I teach, is that everything does something. Where did that come from? And what does that mean to you?
Individuals who had been given some sort of proverbial microphone, been given the chance to speak and pronounce on topics, would often denigrate, they'd often downplay other approaches as saying they were worthless or they were completely non-functional or they had no value. And that was, to me, not quite the way I wanted to go with things. And I saw a chance to think, depending on what your goal is, depending on what your outcome is, you can probably find a way to achieve that. Then spin it around the other way. So swap the equation around. What does this thing do? What could this thing do? So everything has the potential to achieve some outcome. Now, whether you want that outcome or not, that's a different question. But it does something. And you just got to decide whether you want that thing.
I quite like that you said, what does it do or what could it do? And I think that is an issue. And I don't think it's unique to fitness or coaches or teachers, by the way. I think it's across the board. We always miss the detail, which is what I love about that phrase. You're right. We throw a blanket over something. This is good. This is not good. Whereas actually the detail missing is this is really good for this. This may not be as good for that. But then it's not even that simple. It's not even about the outcome. We've also got to consider the individual. And I think that's something I talk about a lot, especially when I deliver the level 2 and 3 qualifications, is when you're prescribing exercise, you need to consider what it says it does in the book. Like it works this muscle, for example, but who is it for and what do they want it to do? Or what do you want it to do for them? What's the outcome? And it's that context that we're just not good at. We'd much rather say, yeah, that's good. No, that's not good.
One way to consider this as well is that the outcomes that people may have, if they're only fall under a certain heading, if you only have 10 viable goals and these then 10 things that you can do to achieve those 10 goals, well, you put them together and that's it. You've solved your problem. But if there's things beyond those 10 outcomes that exist that you want to go for, then you're not going to achieve those. And either because you're unaware that they exist as outcomes, possible outcomes, or the tools you've selected to try and go for them may not achieve them because they're not the right tools. Therefore, everything achieves something, everything does something, and it's just trying to get the match correct or as close as you can to a match.
I've hung on to that phrase for a very long time, and you still every now and then you still say it, and I enjoy it every time. But there's a couple of things that I've taken from various either peers or mentors or coaches or teachers that I've had during the time I've been doing what I do. Are there people or are there things that you have as reference points or as phrases or things that either underpin ideas, thoughts, processes?
Well, the answer to that question is it changes. I think it changes depending on where the current focus is. If you are exploring a certain topic, then you are very much needing to be aware of the leading lights within that field who produce the key works, and you try to read it, understand it, decide on your own opinion on it, and critique that in some sort of way. I can't think of phrases that come to mind, and I'm sure there are many, and I'm sure I could pick through some books and find what are sort of the quotes that I really, really appreciate. Probably more the way of doing rather than any things that people are actually saying. And it's this thinking of critical ways to be, of trying to evaluate what you do for a reason, but also going back to the idea of finding the thing you like doing and doing it as a way to solve this issue of existence, of life, that you are presented with the opportunity of existence and life. And what are you going to do with it? Well, you can select a number of routes, and one of them is to find the thing you like doing and do it. Hopefully that thing will also help others. I think we've alluded to many times here that teaching and teaching exercise blend both those things rather well. I would say that for individuals, if we did sort of draw up lists, then I guess that the tutors that taught me over time initially would be hugely influential. There's other individuals as well who I've worked alongside for a number of years. I still recognize many of my own sort of, flaws through working with them, because again, I see them operate on such a level that's hugely inspirational, will continue to drive you forwards. There isn't a sort of list I'm going to sort of, do a 1 to 10 or a list of quotes.
I think it's nice to know that you are influenced by others as much as you are driven by your own desire for excellence. You know, it's a two-way thing that you want, as a teacher, you want other people to be great. You also want to surround yourselves with great people because you are absolutely open to learning from them and taking from them to make you better. And again, it becomes a cycle because you take from them so you can be better in order to deliver it elsewhere to make other people better. And I like that that's part of who you are. I don't think there needs to be a list to justify that. I think that's nice. Only because it's popped into my mind. I hope he's got his name right. It's Henry Ford, I think, that said we become the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And I don't know how much science there is in that as a statement, but philosophically, I like that and it makes sense to me. Again, I don't know how a significant 5 is, but whether it's conscious or not, I think I definitely do that. I think you do that we are keen to surround ourselves with people that impress us, perhaps entertain us, that perhaps challenge us. Does that sound reasonable to suggest that you are of similar ilk?
I think there's 2 components. One is the individuals you are with. As humans, we will mimic, adopt, copy the things we like. I think it's going to be something we do from year dot that we can't help but do that. I think it's ingrained, hardwired. if we were going to think of where inspiration would come from, this would be more, again, in the ways of doing. I had a conversation, it must be nearly 20 years ago now, with Dr. Paul Bedford. What I explained to him was I was observing and reading books about people I thought were so-called geniuses, let's say. These people that do something extraordinary. So you'd be reading books about Einstein and Mozart and Beethoven and music, but also scientists and also writers and artists. He said, oh, that's a sort of an NLP thing. It's called modeling. I said, oh, okay, fine. I didn't know about that. Great. So there is going to look at, again, how people do things, people that have done extraordinary things, and what is it they did. And one thing that I found within that exploration was all of them worked really, really hard. None of them were just good at it. None of them were just born brilliant. All of them had to work incredibly hard. And that goes for even the people who think sort of they were just great from being 5 years old. Even sort of Mozart was working really, really hard by the time he got really, really good. And they also had individuals around them that could develop them. So I think it also relates to what you're saying in terms of this maybe sort of 5, however many people that we sort of adopt qualities from. These people also had key mentors in their life that could act as a route of progression by just sort of showing the way. And this was very useful because this showed to me that, well, okay, we might not become geniuses, but we can adopt their practices. We can try to steal the best things, become a magpie, steal the shiny stuff, and progress that way at least. So if there's a continuum, well, let's head that way rather than any which way else.
It's the Bruce Lee approach, isn't it? To look at everything and then take what works and discard what doesn't or doesn't fit.
And if you didn't do that, I don't know why you wouldn't do that. I guess the only reason you might not do that is if you hadn't thought about doing it.
Or could there be an element of perceived safety or from the other direction risk in that I'm just thinking about the Bruce Lee thing specifically, and obviously his context there was looking at martial arts and how people, they either did this or they did that. They didn't do a bit of both. And actually it might feel safer to stay within the comfortable confines of knowing that what you do has a label and has it has edges. We're very nervous when the edges are taken away.
Yeah.
And it takes a particular mindset, to take a little step in that direction and think, well, what's over there?
The Greek god of, he's Roman, actually. Janusian thinking is this ability to see sort of two things at the same time. So hold two views at the same time. And from holding two views, seeing two things, is you can then create something new. The fortunate outcome of being involved in something like music is creative. So you search for anything that allows you to come up with new stuff, better stuff. Creativity is something you pursue. And again, is something you think you can get better at by practicing, applying the right ways of doing things. And this combining of approaches, of disciplines, of fields, of the best stuff is what I've seen can improve what you do. Therefore, this mixing of what you have within performance or clinical or fitness, or what you have within a teaching environment can be blended and can make things better and make things new and make things different, and is part of creativity. And I think if there's creativity, I think it tends to make me happy, but also I think it makes other people happy when they're having a chance to create and play. So that's probably one of those sort of, again, underlying sort of themes of this conversation is it brings together, yes, the creative aspects of music with then the creative aspects of teaching. And I think there's a lot of creativity within teaching.
Would it be reasonable to suggest then that maybe some of it feels unfair to say better because of course it is subjective, but some of the more influential teachers do have that sense of creativity within them, and coaches as well. And I've always loved the phrase, although it's sort of newish. So I say always, I've maybe only been aware for a handful of years, but the phrase exertainment, that there's a little bit of exertainment in what we do in order for it to be the exertainment part. I'm trying to think of an analogy when perhaps one's not even needed, but it's maybe allowing a child to put some ketchup on their vegetables in order to digest the good stuff. Is that the role of exertainment in teaching and being creative in sharing ideas and experiences with others?
Well, you've clearly been watching my dietary habits.
You do like a bit of ketchup.
On a bit of broccoli. Exertainment, edutainment, these are terms I know and recognize, and I think that have value. And I think the value in them is we are in a battle for attention. As a teacher, we are striving to have the next thing, the only thing filling our students' mind really is the content where we want to go with this particular session. And hopefully what's happening in their brain, the cognitive changes that are happening are hopefully related to this content. And the learning is starting to happen. Whether they're happening at the speed that the aims and outcomes suggest they should happen is a different matter. But at least we've gained attention, we hold attention, because we're competing for attention with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all these ginormous companies that spend billions of dollars trying to grab people's attention. And we've got to compete with that. If we can, in some way, generate something that holds attention, and whether that is ketchup on broccoli, that's fine. And again, we go back to pragmatism. Whatever works within that classroom that engages the individual in the topic at that time has value. Therefore, if we need to wear long red socks and short shorts, we need to do a handstand or a headstand and do the splits at the same time. That's okay if it holds the attention and it moves that session forwards. So there's huge amounts of value, there's huge amounts of opportunity within the classroom to be very creative. It's for that aim. It's not just for the aim of having the laugh.
No, that is the critical element there, isn't it? Is that and you see it happening. Some people, it is all about the entertainment.
Humor is deadly.
Yeah.
So people will perceive that, oh yeah, I'm gonna make it funny. I'm going to do a few jokes in this session. I'm saying, well, yeah, that's quite a risky strategy, because that's really quite hard. You know, it's not easy to do that. It's quite challenging to be funny and to also be funny and keep this on track and have it a purpose and an outcome that you want. And I'd say, well, I don't know if you should go for that, but sometimes they do. So I would use humor and comedy and those things be very cautious, be very careful with that stuff.
I think ultimately, I forget exactly how you phrased it, which is a shame because I liked it. But your point, I think, was as long as it moves the learning on or the learner, as long as it moves them forward, then
that's the role.
Exactly. So if that's it, isn't it? We have a role, a clearly defined role as a teacher, and if we are meeting the responsibility of our role, then we're probably doing a good job. And I'm sure there are some caveats there. I mean, you talked about a tiny pair of shorts. I imagine there's a particular size of tiny that probably is inappropriate. But broadly speaking, if it moves that person onwards and it does nobody any harm, you're probably doing a good job, however you arrive there.
Classroom within that aspect as well, if it is a classroom for trainers or if it's a classroom for clinicians, the outcome of that is they're still going to work with humans. They're still going to work with people, clients. And that interaction, that rapport building, that rapport maintenance through something that holds attention has massive value in terms of compliance, adherence, and making the outcome of their program, the intervention, a success. It's not just in the classroom that it matters for the learner. It's the learner's then reinterpretation of that within their clinical performance setting. It's where it then goes next. It's for those people in that room that then become tutors. How do they then apply it so they can teach others? Again, the cycle you've referred to numerous times is repeated, and it's for that outcome. There is progression. There is what we perceive as progression.
I feel like I've got another Bruce Lee quote, but I can't remember, again, like word for word, I'm not sure what it is. And I'm conscious that I don't want to type on the computer here because you'll hear the clunking, but there is something he says about knowledge being, worth very little without application. And that's what we're teaching other people to do. Like we have some knowledge that we would like them to have. And so we're sharing and applying it in a way that hopefully will put it in them. But they then, you're absolutely right, have to do that with their own clients, patients, members. They have to engage and communicate in a way that will make that individual have an experience that they perceive as valuable, as positive, and crucially as one they want to do or have again.
And that's where the results will happen. The compliance, the sticking to it, enough time spent, whether it's time under attention, it's the time, it's the frequency, those things that will probably going to bring about the outcomes that they want.
Consistency, isn't it? It's
the consistency word, yeah.
We could be having a conversation, I imagine, about almost anything, and consistency underpins success in all of it.
I guess the caveat to that is consistently inconsistent.
Well, that might well be the case. But in order to be consistent, you have to want to do something, and you're more likely to want to do it if you enjoy it or believe in it or feel empowered by it, enabled by it. I'm thinking backwards a little bit. We discussed some of the differences maybe between fitness and sport, and clearly consistency is important to both population groups. But for general population, consistency feels like the goal, the big goal. How do we get people to find, new habits and keep doing them? And if we're not sending out trainers, coaches, teachers, practitioners, if we're not sending people out that are able to solve that puzzle, or at least make an effort to, then the outcome is not a good one.
The ability to get the volume, time spent, is, as you say, the principal challenge, I think, for general population. If we can meet those aims, then that would be great. But I realize as well that it's not quite as simple as just saying, well, people consistently can get out of bed in the morning and drink a cup of coffee. And the same way they can consistently achieve this amount of physical activity in a week. It's just too simplistic in that way. So how can we bring about a generation or a group of individuals who are trainers that can make that happen is an ongoing concern and debate. And I know we try to do that, and we've tried to do that in the past, and I think that will continue to be something that we try to solve.
Yeah, without a doubt. And even though, I'm not a pessimistic chap by any stretch of the imagination, but even though it often feels like a losing battle, it is absolutely a fight that I'm fully committed to keep fighting. I
think certainly in the more recent past, that's something sort of I know you've pursued strongly in a manner of different ways, and have spoken about that through a number of different social media streams. So I've observed.
I do have another question. I don't know it has a specific place anywhere in the conversation, but I've always enjoyed when we talk in person. And it might be the case that you do this when we talk on the phone, I don't know. But when we talk in person, quite often you will break out some bits of paper and almost illustrate the conversation. Have this kind of, part of me wants to say brainstorm, but then I have in mind people are picturing spider diagrams, and it's definitely not that. But you do have a way of emptying your mind onto a page in a very unique fashion that I enjoy to watch the process of. I don't know if you're aware of what I'm talking about at all, but if you are, where did that come from? And how conscious is it, and what do you then do with those pieces of paper? Because for some reason you do like a piece of paper rather than a nice big notepad.
I think the process is one of extrapolating the classroom to any environment. I think that we are in a learning environment all the time. This is just another whiteboard where I can work with the individual I'm working with at that time in a way where I can display my thinking and reasoning and make it schematic. I can lay it out. I can also give value to words by pointing, underlining, reinforcing, and also seeing them in context and seeing them in sequence. That here's a start, here's an end, here's a middle, and if we go from here to here, we get to there. It also allows the conversation to stay on a certain... It gives it coordinates. It allows it to be directed. It has navigation. It means that I can not get lost. I can bring it back to what the conversation is about. It helps me as a guide to then take down points from the other person, points I'm thinking as they're speaking that I want to add in, or they're inspiring me to think about something else and I want to make sure they're aware of that, and I'm going to write that down and we can talk about it because I think it's really valuable. And sometimes it acts as a punctuation to the conversation, where sometimes there's a need to stop a conversation and show somebody a word and say, we need to focus on this. As words, although we've had a conversation for a long time, words can become a little bit redundant. They are utterances we make, sounds, and after we've heard enough of them, we somewhat stop listening to them, interpreting their value. When you then present them in a different medium, in a written medium on a piece of paper, they again assume a different value and a different significance. You can then point to that and show that, build images around it as well. So yes, there's words, but also, as you say, there's images, there's sketches, there's some sort of model, and models, I guess, help me through the day, as in structure, some sort of system that just makes minute to minute easier. I think it's that. I think it's a process of extrapolating the classroom, but also a way to steer an interaction and to appreciate an interaction, get more from an interaction, more value from it, by taking down words and recording it in some way. Now, where those pieces of paper go, that really depends. Sometimes pieces of paper stick around for a long time because they're of such important significance. Sometimes they're converted into other mediums. They'll be put into another document, or sometimes they just get that's it. The conversation's done and finished and over, and we've moved on to something else, and that paper can go at that point. It's something that I don't notice has been different to what anyone else would do. But if you ask me to sort of reason it out, I think they're the reasons I'd give.
I think they're wonderful reasons. And I think, as I said earlier on, I've always enjoyed, not enjoyed in I certainly don't mean to
Not in a voyeuristic sense.
Yeah, no. And not to make light of it. I find it fascinating. And it absolutely has an effect on our conversations. I'm very aware of the role it plays. And I think I will, from now on, I will see it as, what is her name? I will see you as, I want to say Karen Mundy, but I'm pretty sure that's not her name.
I don't know who that is.
The scene I've got in my mind now is as of one of the Jason Bourne films where she is in the room with all of her CIA officers, I don't know, and they're all sat at computers and on the phone and that piece of paper is that room and you're in charge. And I quite like that. That will be my interpretation from now on, or at least for the time being. I think perhaps it will change again.
I think when we write words down, they are not just something that existed for a very short instance in space as a noise. They now are something else. And then you can start to anchor off that. And words are also synonyms. We can then think about what does it mean in another way. I think also I've spent a lot of time converting concepts into images, into schematics to teach. Things that are difficult maybe to grasp can be, I think, made more straightforward through schematics and images. And I've done that a lot. And anything we do a lot, we usually get better at. So deliberate practice has also been present within that process.
I love that you've just said, sorry to interrupt, but that you've even just said deliberate practice is lovely. It's that word deliberate. Like we talk about practice in the fitness industry all the time. We never use the word, or don't and often enough use the word deliberate or purposeful or meaningful. And you do it without even thinking, but it is the difference between what you're doing having value and perhaps not at all, or at least not much.
Yeah, I need to think about the habitual use of deliberate practice. That's sort of I don't know if that's an oxymoron or not. I need to sort of work with that one. I think these we are at risk. We are prone to our habits. We are, I guess, a collection of habits. When something becomes habitual, it sort of becomes below the radar of awareness. It just happens and we're doing it and we're not really aware we're doing it. And it's almost, are we really alive in that moment? Is it sort of just some dead time that we could have been actually engaged in a process and thoughtful and reflecting on something that could be deliberate? Whereas habit, it might help us get through the day, and it obviously has purposes, and we probably couldn't think about everything we did, but it's somewhat of a missed opportunity once we become habitual. If we just practice without deliberate practice, habitually practicing without focus, then we're probably not getting the most from that time we've spent with it. And time is precious, and it's easy to consider that it's not, but things that matter, well, approximate to health. You can talk about the people that matter. You can also think about the things you have that you don't maybe own, not possessions I'm talking about here, but the things you have, your ability to think, the things you believe you know, and the time that you have. And time, I think, is a precious thing.
We know that practice will make permanent. And so without thinking about what we're practicing, without paying it attention every now and then and noticing what we're practicing, we're not in turn going to notice what we have made permanent.
Yes.
Because not everything we make permanent is desirable.
And even permanence is has a shelf life. There's a best before on permanence, because of we can practice, and yes, it becomes resilient. Now, whether it becomes infinite, probably not. It will falter. That might be a good thing if it's something that we don't necessarily want to have forever. So permanence has a shelf life.
Permanence is temporary.
Exactly. So we might want to be sort of rephrasing the outcome of practice. It's certainly not perfect. It's certainly probably not permanent either.
Let me leave you with this thing, because you've said reframing or rephrasing, and there's no link. That's it. It's quite tenable.
Right.
I quite like the idea at the moment of encouraging people to reframe what is meant by me time. And traditionally, me time is, right, I'm going to kick back, feet up, bottle of wine, box of chocolates. And actually, although that moment, that experience may be quite enjoyable, it's very short-sighted and is unlikely to lead to anything desired, positive, useful, and beneficial. And perhaps we could reframe me time as time spent making me better, making my experience better, making my contribution better. I quite like the idea of that. So with that perhaps in mind, and we happen to be recording at the start of the weekend, what might you call me time, given my new reframed version of a weekend, or certainly this one?
It's difficult for me to separate the enjoyment of writing from that question. I like writing. I've used the word words quite a few times in this conversation. The ability to go and be creative with words, to formulate sentences, to say something that reads well in terms of what I consider the criteria of reading well, that say something that is meaningful about a topic of interest to me, and to put myself up against that spotlight of scrutiny that you have to have when you write, of does this meet the standards? Is this backed by support and evidence? So writing in that way is a brilliant test of what you know, but also is a chance to be creative. So it's very hard to say that me time wouldn't involve some of that. There's then the next step with words would be reading. And there's many books I guess I've read that are classed under fiction, and I guess these sort of great works of fiction over the years. Often how they're written is something that's very attractive to me, even more than what the story is about. So again, there's an appreciation of words in this way. So again, reading, writing. There's also going to be thinking. So before this conversation, one thing I was doing was taking some time just to sort of lie down quietly in a room with the lights out and think about what I'd been writing and reading this afternoon. So that's the next sort of interaction between words and mind. One is creation, one is absorbing and reflecting. And then this last one is bringing that together in terms of, well, when I put it all into my mind together now, and I think of nothing and let these things float around, what comes out next? Then I'll return back to the writing and see what has evolved. Exercise is still a big part of what will be in my life. I use myself as a test tube for exercises and exercise design, and ideas about what I think others could do with their clients as well as my own. And this means that the process of exercise is one of exploration. That again just sort of feeds in your ability to make up stuff, to make up exercises and think about what the outcome is. So everything does something. So there's the relationship of words, there's the relationship of exercise. Music is a very tricky thing. I still have some guitars and I still sometimes remember that I can play them. The thing with music is it's, again, a very cognitive process for me. I find it difficult to listen to music without analyzing and structuring and critiquing in some way. So it can be a process that is relaxing, but it's also one that does get the cognitive juices flowing. So there's music, there's words, and there's movement. Is that an exercise class from school? Yeah, music and movement. Yeah, you run around in your pants.
Maybe it was a northern school thing. I don't know.
I think Keith Smith played it.
Listen, I think without a doubt, you have answered my question exactly as I would have hoped you would in regards to interpreting my new reframed me time. And yet at the same time, given me so much more than I could have hoped for. So thank you very much. And I certainly wish that all of those processes do take place this weekend and all of them are fruitful and enjoyable. It could be that people listening have more of an interest in this than you do, but I had to check. It is Pamela Landy hunting Jason Bourne.
I'm still not entirely sure any more than I was with the last person. So. Karen Mundy.
Karen Mundy. Karen Mundy may well be the real life version of Pamela Landy, who of course is a character in a movie. So I hope if that is the case, that I've not outed her and compromised her on a security level. That would be awful.
What you could be sure with the CIA is don't explain, don't complain. So I don't think you'd be hearing from them.
Well, I take comfort in that. Lincoln Blandford, thank you very much. And I hope we get to speak again.
I massively enjoyed it. Good to explore these topics, reflect on them. And I hope it's, is valuable, enjoyable at least. And certainly, as I say, it was good to explore and have the time to reflect on them.
Weapons activated. Goodbye.